Hi, this is the voice, Michael Chavello. You're listening to the Premium Oddscast, hosted by leading MMA odds maker Nick Kalikas, fight scientist and author of Fightnomics, Reed Kuhn, and MMA journalist Brian Hemminger. The absolute best UFC betting info, hits, statistics, and analysis from the most respected authority in mixed martial arts betting, MMAOddsBreaker.com.
Welcome to the Premium Oddscast, presented by 5 Dime Sportsbook and Countermove, your home for fantasy MMA. I'm Brian Hemminger, joined today by leading mixed martial arts oddsmaker Nick Kalikas to break down this Saturday's UFC Fight Night 76 event, which takes place in Dublin, Ireland. If you're unfamiliar with our format, myself and Nick will be breaking down the fight card from top to bottom, providing extensive analysis and a pick for each fight after doing our film study for the event. Briefly looking back at our last event, our premium package bets for UFC 192 went 2-2 to lose 0.3 units overall. We won our underdog bet on Ryan Bader and our parlay of Ruslan Magomedov with Albert Tumenov, but lost our preliminary card plays on both Islam Makhachev and Victor Pesta. Back to the present, UFC Fight Night 76 features an 11-fight card in total and will be aired in its entirety on UFC Fight Pass this Saturday afternoon. Let's dive right in. Now, kicking off the preliminary card is a middleweight contest between Bubba Bush, who is 8-3, and Gareth McClellan, who is 11-3. Now, Nick, where did you open this fight, and how has the public shifted at things so far?
I opened Bush minus 245, the comeback at McClellan plus 175. Now looking over at our sponsor 5dimes.eu, it's currently Bush minus 260 and the comeback at McClellan is plus 220. So a little bit more action coming in towards Bush, and again, a little bit more parlay action that people are throwing him in there as well. This is a tough fight because both of these guys had lackluster debuts in the UFC, and a lot of people were expecting better things from him. Starting off with Bush first, he is a former Legacy FC champion. The guy made his official UFC debut against Kevin Casey, and he really got destroyed in that fight. I mean, he got caught with a big left and dropped right away from Casey, and then Casey finished him on the ground with some nasty ground and pound. So Bush's performance did not go as planned, and his debut was not successful. Now, overall, Bush is a very skilled fighter. I mean, he's got a complete, well-rounded game. I mean, he definitely needs to work maybe to enhance some of his skill set, especially on the feet. I think his ground game is his best attribute. The guy's a very strong fighter. He likes to take the fight to the floor, control ground and pound a little bit, and actually has a capable submission game. And then on the feet, he's not that bad. I mean, he does have a little bit of power. Again, defensively, it is a little bit of concern with Bush as well, but he's definitely a talented, powerful fighter that is capable of winning some fights in the middleweight division, the UFC. So he definitely needs to rebound here and perform a little bit better. And he has the opportunity against McClellan here. McClellan is another guy that was kind of hyped, and a lot of people were expecting good things before he made his UFC debut. I mean, he's a former EFC champion. He was supposedly one of South Africa's best MMA fighters. And then he made that lackluster debut against Fabinski, which is actually a welterweight. And he lost a clear unanimous decision. Fabinski basically, in my opinion, he looked a little slow in that debut loss. He gassed along the way. And typically he doesn't have horrible cardio or anything. I mean, he could definitely go 3 rounds. It just, everything about that performance wasn't good. I mean, he got outgrinded by, again, a welterweight. His striking seemed to be a little bit subpar as well. And he's another guy that really has an overall skill set. And again, you could kind of feature his ground game as being his best attribute as well. So stylistically, McClellan and Bush match up relatively well. They're similar in a lot of ways. I just think Bush is a little bit faster, a little bit stronger. I think Bush is going to probably be able to outpoint McClellan along the ways. But there is a concern with Bush as well because, again, defensively, I don't trust his chin that much, and I think McClellan is capable of maybe landing some significant strikes along the way that can make life a little bit interesting for Bush. But if Bush does not get caught in this fight, I think it is his fight to win or lose. I think he can dominate the fight, probably control the pace of this fight and get some takedowns where he needs to. It's going to be tough, I think, for him to finish McClellan, but I still think he could do enough to kind of win a unanimous decision type of fight here. So it is Bush for me as far as the pick goes. I think he is the better fighter, and he should come back and perform a little bit better in his second UFC fight.
Yeah, I'll keep this one sweet and simple. Gareth McClellan, being from South Africa, they're just way behind in terms of development in their mixed martial arts scene. So yeah, he was a champion in South Africa, but that doesn't mean much. A South African fighter has yet to pick up a win in the UFC, and for reason, because they just aren't very good yet. So I think Bubba Bush is a good fighter. He just got, bad luck in his UFC debut, got caught coming in aggressively against Kevin Casey, a guy that, people weren't expecting to have a lot of power on the feet. And, he ended up getting finished. Now, if Gareth McClellan catches him, then maybe Bubba Bush could get in a little bit of trouble. But I don't see that happening. I think Bubba Bush is an excellent grappler, really good wrestler. And when he gets on top of people, he finishes them. He is ferocious on the ground, looks for the finish, constantly just a very, very aggressive, dangerous guy on the canvas. And I expect with the way that McClellan got manhandled by Bartosz Babinski, a welterweight, who was a good wrestler, but just the fact that a guy that's a weight class lower than him manhandled him with takedowns and top control for the most part in their fight, I think Bubba Bush should be able to get this fight to the ground. He should be able to keep it there, get in top position, and as long as he doesn't do something stupid like walk right into a knee or, an uppercut or something, or walk right into a guillotine choke on the ground or a triangle choke or something, then Bubba Bush should win this fight convincingly. He just is the better ground fighter. McClellan's a step or two behind in that department, and I don't see him catching up. So I like Bubba Bush quite a bit here, actually. Now moving down to the featherweight division, we have Darren Elkins, who is 19-5, taking on Rob Whiteford, who is 12-2. Now, Nick, what's the MMA Oddsmaker's perspective on this one?
I open Elkins minus 180, the comeback on Whiteford plus 140, and the action has come in on Whiteford overall. It is now minus 145 for Elkins. The comeback on Whiteford is plus 125. Now, at the sports books, especially at 5 dimes, they are getting two-way action on this fight. In fact, they've been bet back on Elkins a little bit, so it's not probably as significant as it seems in the line drop. I mean, it will be pretty even, and I think we're going to see a lot of two-way opinion on this fight. And in fact, I think a lot of sportsbooks are actually going to need Whiteford to come through here in this spot because I think more action will continue to trickle in on Elkins as he goes. I mean, Elkins is more of the proven fighter in this spot for sure. Elkins is a heck of a grinder. I know he's coming off a unanimous decision loss to Hakron Diaz, where he actually got a bit of his own medicine and he actually got put on his back. And that's what Elkins likes to do in fights. He likes to basically, his stand-up game is improving. I mean, he can stand and strike a little bit. I mean, against good strikers, he doesn't really want to go that route. He wants to kind of control the action, pin him up against the cage and look for takedowns and just kind of grind him out. That's what Elkins does best. But he is developing his skill set and he's getting decent in all areas, especially now that he's training with Team Alpha Male. That's only going to help him, I think, overall. It's nice for him to get a fresh look. But the problem with Elkins is, again, he just doesn't have, if he can't get the fight to the ground, he just doesn't have enough offense at times to really be successful. And I guess Whiteford's a guy that is actually improving fight by fight as well. I mean, he's training with American Top Team now, which is great for him. I think his wrestling has always been actually a little bit underrated. So Whiteford has a solid, well-rounded skill set in his own right. And I think he actually has a ton of power. I mean, look at his last fight. He was very successful against a guy that a lot of people probably won't give enough credit maybe in Redmond. I mean, that was a very solid win for Whiteford. He looked explosive on the feet, fast, everything that you want to see in his improvement. I mean, it was kind of almost a little bit short to kind of get a better feel for his improvement overall. But at the same time, you got to give him credit because he just went out there and dominated a guy that's not easy to get rid of in Redmond. So, impressive win for Whiteford. Now, his fight against Pineda, the fight before that, he was looking good in that fight too, deserved to get that decision. But the problem with Whiteford at times is his cardio does seem to let him down. And I think that's one of the biggest issues for me in this fight as well. I think it's going to be a really competitive fight because I think Whiteford's going to be able to stuff some takedowns along the way. And I think he's going to be able to have some success on the feet, obviously, because that's what he does best. And I think that's where he has a huge advantage for, in this fight over Elkins, because I think he has a speed advantage. He's got the power advantage. Elkins' chin is a little bit suspect at times. He has been knocked out a couple times as well. So if Whiteford can keep this thing up, he's probably going to win this fight. But the problem is, after round 1, how's Whiteford going to look? Is his cardio going to let him down? Is he going to slow up in round 2 and round 3? Because if that's the case, then I think that Elkins will probably end up stealing the decision or even possibly looking for a sub and catching Whiteford along the way as well. I've been kind of bouncing back and forth on this fight. I'm going to bank on Whiteford's improvement level, and I think his cardio will be good enough to steal 2 out of 3 rounds against Elkins. But that is, again, the biggest concern here because I do think this is a winnable fight for Whiteford. Obviously, it's a winnable fight for Elkins, so it is, I think, closer to a pick'em type of fight with a slight lean towards Elkins. But that being said, I'm going to go with the underdog here and I'm going to pick Whiteford because I do believe that he has a little bit more upside. I think he has a little bit more confidence coming into this fight and he knows what Elkins is going to bring to the table. Elkins will try to take him down and grind him out, stop it, and can he work his game plan, be successful at it? I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and I think he will. So I'm going to pick Whiteford to pull off the upset over Elkins.
I don't think that Rob Whiteford is a bad pick here because, honestly, he looked amazing in that last fight against Redmond. His big issue, though, has been conditioning. He slows down in fights. In that last fight, he looked great, but it ended in the first round. So who knows how it would have turned out if he had been allowed to continue in the second or third. Whiteford has had some issues in that department. He definitely, the fight gets a little ugly. That great footwork that he possesses for the most part, it goes out the window a little bit as the fight goes on. The head movement, the defense, everything. So I will be worried about that in this fight. But that being said, I think Whiteford will win the first round against Darren Elkins. Almost 100%, because Whiteford does have a good judo base. He should be able to avoid Elkins' clinch and takedown attempts, at least early in this fight. The difference here is I think Elkins is a cardio machine. He's one of the biggest grinders in the entire UFC roster. He just wears people down. Very physically strong, great wrestler. And he switched over to a gym that is only going to help enhance those attributes with a Team Alpha Male. So there's going to be a nice little battle of Team Alpha Male against American Top Team. And while I expect Whiteford to pick up that first round, I don't see Whiteford getting the second or third because Elkins just is tenacious. He just gets after you. And then when you get tired, that's when he gets stronger. So unless this is a situation like the Cochran Diaz fight where Diaz was able to win the first two and then slow down in the third, which was Elkins' last performance, I see Elkins probably losing that first round, Whiteford dancing around on the outside, maybe avoiding takedowns, and then just trying to dish as much punishment as possible in every bit of open space he gets until the second and third rounds when he starts to slow down a little bit. And then I can see Elkins picking up some takedowns, getting this fight to the canvas. And I would not be shocked to see Darren Elkins pick up a third round submission here. I know he does not have a submission yet in the UFC, but he has the most submission attempts of any featherweight on the entire roster. And I think with those guys at Alpha Male, they're going to really sharpen up some of his techniques a little bit, maybe find where he's leaving some space, having some issues with just the overall technical quality. And I think Elkins does turn it up here late in this fight and takes it over. For Rob Whiteford to win this fight, I think he needs to finish it in the first round like Chad Mendez did. And I'm not quite sure he has that kind of power. So we'll see what happens, but I think Darren Elkins turns it on late and either gets a decision or a late submission. So Darren Elkins is my pick. Now moving up to the welterweight division, we have Cathal Pendred, who is 17-3-1, versus Tom Breeze, who is 8-0. Now, Nick, where did you open this fight, and how has the public shifted things so far?
I opened Breeze minus 135, the comeback on Pendred minus 105. A lot of happy people out there right now that jumped on Breeze at minus 135, and I don't blame you because the line right now is minus 260 for Breeze, and the comeback on Pendred is plus 220. Pendred, man, I'll tell you what, I like the guy, I respect the guy, definitely, but man, is he a pain sometimes to set lines on because the truth is, the guy's tough as nails. He has obviously a good camp behind him as well. And he is improving. The problem with Pendred is he's just not great anywhere. He's just your typical grinder. He likes to control the pace of the fight, likes to get some takedowns a little bit. On the feet, he's a little bit slow. He's not a real threat in any area. I mean, as far as finishing ability goes, he does have some knockouts and some power, on his resume or whatever, because he has finished some fights. But overall, and especially in the UFC, he's more of your grinder. He's going to have to steal some decisions, as he's done thus far. Basically, he's a decision machine. Controversial to be as well. I mean, in his last fight even, I thought that he was actually going to put on a little bit of better performance because Howard's slipping a little bit, and he actually, he got beat clearly there, and he still lost only by split decision. It wasn't a split decision. It was a clear decision for Howard. So the judges, for some reason, just love Pendred's grinding style and seem to give him a little bit more credit than he deserves at times. So that is a concern. I'm stating all that stuff because if this fight hits the scorecards, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see another questionable or bad type of decision with Pendred stealing it here. But as far as skill set goes, I mean, Breeze is the younger fighter here. He's a little bit younger. He's been having some hype again around him for a long time now. He's training at TriStar. He had a very successful and impressive debut win over Dutra. So he's got some momentum on his side. And Breeze is more known for his submission skill. And he actually ended up winning his last fight, which again was very impressive, by KO. So the guy has the ability to finish now on the feet. He has a very good submission game, and he finishes the fights on the ground as well. His takedown skill isn't the greatest. He still needs to improve that wrestling, but at TriStar, he should get better at that. And then he does have a tendency at times to get controlled and pinned up against the cage. So that's why I think Pendred, if he comes up with a really strong game plan and sticks with it and pins Breeze up against the cage, doesn't let him utilize some of the attributes that Breeze has, he's going to be a little bit taller. Breeze does have a decent clinch game, and his striking is improving, so Pendred has to be careful, especially because Pendred's strike defense, I haven't mentioned it yet, his strike defense isn't that good either. He's very hittable. He's been rocked before. He's been wobbled before. So I really even don't trust his chin. So Breeze could possibly finish him on the feet. He could possibly catch him on the ground with a sub as well. Or he could possibly do enough to outpoint Pendred by decision. So there are more ways for Breeze to win this fight. I understand it. But the problem is, if he doesn't finish Pendred again, for me, I think it's going to be a competitive decision, maybe an ugly type of decision that the judges could get wrong. So with all that being said, I do believe that Breeze has, again, more upside. He is going to continue to improve his game at TriStar. He's becoming more dangerous, and I think it's his fight to win or lose. So I am going to pick Breeze. I'm not going to pick Pendred, but just be cautious out there because of what I just said with the decision factor. I mean, a lot of you guys are banking on Breeze probably getting the finish over Pendred along the way or even outpointing him, so I understand that, but just be careful because Pendred is Pendred.
On paper, this is an easy fight for Tom Breeze, in my opinion. He's a little bit longer, a little bit taller. He's a huge welterweight overall. And while normally his striking isn't a huge threat, he showed some pretty good knockout power in that last fight, very surprisingly. And I think he is extremely dangerous. Now, on the ground, that's really where Breeze shines. He is a very, very talented MMA grappler. It's not just that he's a Brazilian jiu-jitsu artist. I mean, this guy knows what he's doing. He's been training at TriStar for a little bit now. He actually originally started training at TriStar because he was replicating Nick Diaz in George St. Pierre's training camp for his title defense against Diaz. So I think, and he's been there ever since. He has a good wrestling, a top-notch ground game, and while he did showcase that power, the striking is still developing, but regardless of that, I think he is going to be the better striker than Cathal Pendred. Breeze also showcased some really heavy leg kicks, and he has a sneaky head kick that he's been developing, and he could definitely catch Pendred with either of those. Especially, I think he can light Pendred up with the leg kicks, with the way that Pendred fights, the way that he's constantly pushing forward and trying to put pressure on his opponents. Now, Pendred, he trains out of the SBG gym in Ireland with Conor McGregor and those guys, but he does not fight like Conor McGregor at all. He has decent wrestling. He puts good pressure on his opponents. He's a grinder. That's really the best way to describe him. He just grinds fights out, but not in the Darren Elkins way. It's more he just hangs in there. His opponents hurt him. Maybe they spend too much time trying to finish him, and then maybe they slow down a little bit, and then he starts to take over a little bit. And even then, he doesn't really take over. Honestly, there's only maybe 2 fights so far that he should have won in the UFC, and that was his debut against Mike King, where he got his finish, and then the one against Augusto Montano that was just an ugly staring contest that he did a little bit more. For the most part, he has not looked good in his fights. He gets hurt in almost every single fight, and he doesn't have a very good chin. He's not very fast. He's slow. He's plodding. It almost looks like he's moving through quicksand for the most part when he's in open space. But when he's at his best, it's when he's pushing his opponent against the fence. It's not pretty, but it takes away his opponent's strengths. And if he can get in top position on the ground, although I don't really see him being able to take Breeze down, he might be able to shove Breeze around a little bit. But I don't see Breeze allowing that to happen for extended periods of time. And Pendred, really the biggest thing he's got going for him in this fight is he's Irish and he's fighting in Dublin, and the crowd's going to be super behind him. And I'm expecting that the judges could get swayed by that. And for some reason, this guy has some magical spell over the judges, and he wins fights that he should not win. I mean, that Umalatov fight, the Sean Spencer fight, both were travesties that he ended up winning those. So you're going to have to be careful with this, just because for some reason Pendred finds ways to win. But it wouldn't shock me either to see Tom Breeze pick up a finish here. The guy has a very good submission threat, and he has some developing power, and he clearly could crack Cathal Pendred and finish him. So I'm going to keep an eye out for that. Maybe Breeze inside the distance prop or something. But overall, you got to be careful. Just as Nick mentioned, Cathal Pendred has this way with the judges. So I'm picking Tom Breeze, but I'm advising caution just because you never know what's going to happen in a Cathal Pendred fight, especially in Ireland. Now moving up to the middleweight division, we have Scott Askham, who is 13-1, taking on Krzysztof Jotko, who is 15-1. Now, Nick, what's the MMA odds maker's perspective on this one?
I open Askham minus 130, the comeback on Jotko minus 110. So virtually a pick 'em with a very slight lean towards Askham in this fight. Seems to be staying steady because right now over at 5 dimes, it is Askham minus 135. The comeback is plus 115 on Jotko. So two-way action coming in, a lot of split opinions on this fight. And I am expecting a really close competitive fight. Now, Askham, in my opinion, has a slight lean, and it's about a pick-em fight with a slight lean towards Askham. So I think that's correct as far as the line goes as well, because I'm expecting a competitive fight. Askham has the skill set. He has the ability to make life interesting and miserable actually at times for Jotko, because I believe that he is the better striker overall in this spot. He's the more capable finisher as well. The ground game, you have to give Askham some credit on the ground as well. He's capable of finishing the fight with some subs. He has some wrestling to go along with it. Of course, in his fight against Siedenblad, he wasn't successful. He ended up stuffing a lot of takedowns in that fight, but a guy that you can compare both fighters to, I'm referring to. I mean, Askham's takedown defense held up for the most part, but he did get put on his back, and he did lose that fight, and he ended up getting grinded out. Now, credit to him that he survived it, because Siedenblad has such a good submission game. So his submission defense of Askham is legit, so I don't expect Jotko to go out there and sub him. So Jotko's going to kind of have to do what he does best and strike with him a little bit, try to outgrind him a little bit up against the cage and kind of slow the pace of the fight down. And Jotko is very successful doing that sort of thing. Now, overall, Jotko does have decent takedown defense, but again, and against the comparable opponent, again, we're not using MMA math, but Siedenblad ended up getting Jotko down and ended up finishing him. So as far as submission defense goes, you have to give the slight edge to Askham here, but Jotko in most cases is pretty game on the ground as well. He's a complete fighter. He has a little bit of underrated striking skill and power on the feet as well. So Jotko versus Askham should be a close fight, and I think both of these guys are kind of tough enough to withstand each other's finishing ability, and we're probably going to see the scorecards. So that's why you're seeing such a pick-em type of fight. But I do give the slight lean still towards Askham because I think he is the better point fighter in this case, because I don't think he's going to finish Jotko. So I think he is going to land a little bit more significant strikes on the feet. I think he's going to be able to kind of fend off Jotko up against the cage and maybe reverse things and get better positioning as well. So I expect this fight to take place in all areas, and it is relatively competitive, but you do have to slightly lean a little bit more towards Askham, I think, in this fight, because again, he's going to throw more offensively. He has more finishing capabilities as well. And if it's a scorecards, even though it's close, I think he outpoints him. So all signs are pointing towards Askham a little bit here, but I am expecting a really competitive fight.
I think Askham has made the better overall decisions with his training. After his UFC debut, where he got out-grappled by Siedenblad, Askham switched up his training a little bit, switched over to Atherton Submission Wrestling Gym with fellow UFC fighter Mike Wilkinson. He really started working on his ground game a little bit and maybe the defensive wrestling, and it paid off. I mean, his last fight, he looked terrific, was able to pick up a very, very impressive first round finish, just absolutely obliterated his opponent. Askham on the feet, he's still young, just 27 years old. He's long, he has good power, great knees in the clinch. He's a dangerous fighter in the pure stand-up and in the clinch. He's a guy that can hurt you with all of his limbs, especially the knees, but he also has good power with his hands. So I really do think Askham is the type of guy that can present a lot of problems to people that are forced to stand and trade with him. Now, Jotko, on the other hand, he's also a stand-up fighter, a good Polish fighter. His problem, he last fought in October of 2014, although he was training for a fight this summer and had the fight canceled in June. It wasn't really his fault. He trains at multiple gyms. He's more of a nomad. He bounces around. He's not really set in stone at any one place, and I think that is to his detriment. Like, he's a guy that I think needs to find a good home, that he can really start focusing on his training and his technique, because there's still a lot of faults that he has. Oh, right now, the best thing he has going for him is that he's a good stand-up fighter, but other than that, he hasn't proven much. I mean, his one UFC loss, he got absolutely crushed by Siedenblad. And Siedenblad Askham was a lot closer, so they actually do have a common opponent. But Jotko's fight against Siedenblad, he got taken down repeatedly, and then right at the end of the second round, he ended up getting submitted as he tried to work his way to the feet. And in his 2 wins, I mean, they were against bottom-of-the-barrel UFC middleweights. And yeah, Jotko was able to win, but they were not impressive victories. They were pretty ugly. And while he does possess some power on the feet, he has not proven anything to me on why he was able to pick up 13 wins outside the UFC without a loss. Like right now, to me, he is still, while he's young at 26, he still has a long ways to go before he's rounded out his game. So overall, I see this fight mostly taking place either in the pure stand-up or in the clinch. I don't really see it going to the ground unless Askham's the one that initiates it, although I don't see that happening a lot. And I just think that in a pure stand-up battle, I think Askham's the better fighter. He's got more power. He's got a good chin, so he can take whatever Jotko gives him. And I expect Askham to use a little bit of that length as well. I feel Askham has this fight. I'm a little surprised at the way the odds are right now, so I think he wins, and he could potentially win convincingly. Now dropping down to the women's strawweight division, we have Aisling Daly, who is 15-5, taking on Erica Almeida, who is 7-1. Now, Nick, where did you open this fight, and how has the public shifted things so far?
I opened Daly minus 125, the comeback on Almeida minus 115, and right now it's Daly minus 135, the comeback on Almeida is plus 115. So two-way action coming in, a little bit more coming in Daly's way as well. She does have the experience factor and the experience edge in this fight. Sometimes that doesn't matter as much depending on the situation here. But in this fight, I think it will carry. She is getting a little bit better fight. I mean, she's been a savvy vet for a long time, so she has really nothing to prove. But at the same time, there's been a spot in her career, I mean, right before The Ultimate Fighter, actually, and, you know, before she did UFC, she kind of it seemed like she was almost on a little bit of a decline there. She had a few losses in a row. I believe she had like 3 straight losses in a row. So I thought Daly's better days were behind her, but you know what? She's kind of had a resurgence from The Ultimate Fighter, and then into her UFC fights, even in her last fight against Randa Marcos. Randa Marcos is one of the best girls at 115, no doubt about that. And Daly hung in there really close, and especially towards the end of that fight made it even more interesting. So Daly's a game fighter. I mean, you cannot argue that she's back to, kind of being herself, what she used to be. And she's a threat pretty much everywhere. I mean, on the feet, really, I don't think that's her best attribute. She's more of a grappling-based fighter that likes to get the fight to the floor and likes to submit people. I mean, she has a really good, sneaky good ground submission game. There's no doubt about that. So that's her strongest attribute. But on the feet, she's not bad. And she has that fight in her and the desire to actually push the pace on people as well. So Daly has cardio. She's got okay skill on the feet. She has a really good grappling game to go along with it. And she has that experience where she's been in there with some of the best in the world throughout her career. So she knows that she's not going to be outclassed in any situation at this point, especially to Almeida, which actually, as far as overall, I mean, experience in that level, she doesn't have quite the resume that Daly does. But Almeida is one of these girls that definitely is getting better. She's improving as well. She's a former Jungle Fight straw and brown belt and BJJ, but above. Submission game is far more dangerous at times, especially in the ladies division, than the brown belt level. I think she is a very capable submission fighter. Her stand-up game is okay. I mean, it's getting a little bit better. But she still has a long way to go as well. She does like to close a gap and look for takedowns. Her wrestling needs some work as well, but she has okay trip takedowns and throws. So she has a way to get the fight to the floor. She's going to actually be a little bit taller than Daly here as well and have, I believe, a 4-inch reach advantage. So that makes things interesting. And when she does throw, Almeida, she does throw with intent. I mean, she throws with some power. It's a little wide, so it leaves some openings at times, but she is capable of doing some damage. So I'm expecting this one, honestly, to be another very close competitive type of fight that could go back and forth. The problem with Almeida is that she does get taken down and she does at times get a little bit tentative and she lets herself get controlled. So if that's the case against Daly, that's not going to be a good thing and it could cost her the fight. But I think we're going to see a better and more improved Almeida in this fight as well. I think we're going to see this fight again take place everywhere and virtually a pick 'em with a slight lean towards Daly is probably the right way to go. So I'm going to pick Daly to win this fight based on all the things I just went over, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if Almeida steps it up. She shows up looking better than most of us thought and she pulls off this upset win. But I am going to pick Daly to win.
Almeida is a dangerous fighter. She's still a young fighter, But her big issue is, and her biggest fatal flaw, honestly, is the fact that she's way too comfortable fighting off of her back. She gets to the ground, and more often than not, she's going to be looking for submissions and sweeps and stuff off of her back, and I don't expect Daly to get controlled there. Almeida, trains out of Brazil. She's got some talent. I mean, becoming the Jungle Fight women's strawweight champion is a big deal because, Jungle Fight fighters do very well in the UFC. But Daly is so much more experienced than her, trains out of a much bigger gym, a much more accomplished gym at the SBG. And Daly's, from Ireland. She's going to be fighting in front of her, hometown crowd for the first time in the UFC at least. And I expect Daly to use some of her superior overall top control. And I think the ground game's a bit of a wash. But the fact that Almeida's too willing to give up position to go for submissions, too willing to work off of her back instead of try to get back to her feet, is going to be her fatal flaw in this fight. On the feet, I don't think either fighter's that good. Daly's a little bit more aggressive. Almeida's still developing in the stand-up department. She throws decent combinations, but nothing much more than the basic 1-2s. But Daly, on the other hand, she's just more aggressive. She pushes a pretty high pace. So I expect Daly to get a little bit better on the stand-up. And when they do go to the ground, I think the submissions will be a bit of a wash, but Daly will be in top position for the most part. So that's pretty much going to factor into why I think that Daly's going to be picking up this win, probably by decision, because Almeida is tough. I mean, she did last all 3 rounds against Juliana Lima in her UFC debut on relatively short notice. But I still think that this is Aisling Daly's fight to lose. She's going to have a huge amount of crowd support behind her, and I think that that's going to help perk her up a little bit even more. So I'm going to side with Aisling Daly here. Now, moving up to the flyweight division, we have Neil Seery, who is 15-11, taking on John Delos Reyes, who is 8-4. Now, Nick, what's the MMA oddsmaker's perspective on this one?
I opened Seery minus 185, the comeback on Delos Reyes, plus 145, and right now it's Seery minus 155, Reyes is plus 135. So a little bit more dog action coming in, but the line margins have tightened up some. I'm a little surprised that the line hasn't went up towards Seery. I figured most of the general betting public would come in that way. Seery has gained a lot of respect based on his performances in the UFC thus far. I mean, looking at just his plain record, he's 15-11, but he's above and beyond that. I mean, he's definitely one of these type of fighters that he's a savvy vet. He's long time. He's 36 years old, which you kind of don't want to see that because he's obviously some of his better years are behind him. I mean, physically, but mentally and his ability to actually compete with some decent fighters. I mean, he still has it. So he doesn't look like a 36-year-old or he doesn't look like he's been, worn years. He looks the best that I think he's ever been at this point of his career as well. So that's a lot of good things to say about Seery. He's a sniper basically on the feet. I mean, very tough. He's more than capable of finishing opponents. He's got to believe like 6 knockouts throughout his career on the feet, but on the ground, he's no slouch either. I mean, I think that's still where he's vulnerable at the most. I think he can, obviously in his last fight against Smolka, Smolka took advantage of the ground game as well. It's impressive that he didn't get subbed. So submission defense is improving and it has improved, fight by fight throughout his career, but that's still the area where he's vulnerable. So he's got to be careful on the ground because Reyes is one of those guys that has a little bit of an underrated ground game. He has a lot of power on the feet as well. So Reyes is a very dangerous opponent. But the problem with Reyes is, I mean, the guy is a little bit too aggressive that it does leave openings at times as well. His chin is a little bit suspect. He has been wobbled in fights. That is definitely a concern. I mean, even in his last fight where he did get the W, he was wobbled in that fight as well. So, and that wasn't, that was against a lesser opponent, obviously, than he's facing here in series. So Reyes has some question marks around him, and a lot of it is defensively. I mean, his chin, like I said, and then his ability, even on the ground, when he does get the fight to the ground, I mean, his sub-defense is a little bit questionable at times as well. So there's some question on Reyes, and honestly, if you just look at it, between these two fighters, Seery is the more proven, established veteran. I think he has the more technical skill set overall, and he should expose Reyes along the way in a 3-round fight where he will find those openings and probably have some success. So I have to go with Seery because I do trust him more. But I mean, as far as laying juice and being a little bit more cautious on this fight, you have to be, I think, because Reyes is one of these guys. Again, he has a tremendous amount of power for the flyweight division on the feet. So you never know. I mean, Siri, even though his chin has been pretty solid throughout his career, he is, again, 36 years old, and Reyes does hit pretty hard. So that could be something to watch out for. And then again, on the ground, even though Reyes has some defensive issues, he has a pretty good sneaky sub game as well. So offensively, he does have, I think, an edge on the ground over Siri as well. So he has the finishing capabilities, but I still think that Reyes will lose because Siri finds a way to, I mean, he's tough as nails. He finds a way to kind of land his shots and pick them apart along the way, either steals a decision or does finish Reyes along the way as well. So I am picking Siri here, but I'm expecting another great fight. I mean, both these guys are going to want to stand and bang at times, and it should be a fun fight at least.
Yeah, this should be a very entertaining fight, mainly because John De Los Reyes just always has crazy fights. So far in all 3 of his UFC fights, they have not gone the distance. And for the most part, I mean, it's either live by the sword, die by the sword with him. De Los Reyes, UFC debut, takes on Dustin Kimura, drops him, and then gets submitted from Kimura's guard. Next fight, drops down to flyweight, takes on Kyoji Horiguchi, just complete mismatch, gets knocked out quickly in the first round. And then his last fight, I mean, just a complete war against Roldan Sangcheon, gets dropped, comes back, ends up winning by rear naked choke in the second round. I mean, it was just a complete back and forth brawl. And I think that's the type of fight he needs to have, because he's not a technical fighter. He's sloppy. He's really sloppy. He's wild. He's reckless. And he's actually at his best when he's in those moments and forces his opponent to do that. If he's facing someone that's going to use their technique, that's going to slow down the pace of the fight, I think he gets in a lot of trouble. So that's why he was able to get completely dismantled by somebody like Kyoji Horiguchi. And I think on the feet, I think he will get dismantled by Neil Siri. Siri is a very solid technical boxer, and I see him piecing up John De Los Reyes on the feet. Even though Reyes probably has a little bit more pure punching power, Siri's chin has not been tested yet in the UFC, and Siri packs some heat too. So I think Siri's going to light De Los Reyes up a little bit on the feet. And on the ground, while De Los Reyes is a bit of a threat there, he's also been, controlled on the ground as well a little bit. So I don't think that he's a great ground fighter. And really, it's more that in that last fight, he was taking advantage of a lot of the mistakes Sangcheon was making on the ground. And I expect Siri to not make those same mistakes. There is an 8-year age gap in this fight, but I don't think it'll play too much of a part, because usually what happens with the age is your chin gets worse, and maybe you get a little bit slower. But with the way that John De Los Reyes fights, I don't think the speed will have much to do with it. And he's actually the one with the worst chin. So I don't think the age will be an issue whatsoever in this fight. And honestly, as long as Siri's able to keep this fight at distance on the feet and just start picking apart De Los Reyes, I think he's going to be in a really good spot. And if it does go to the ground, Siri's okay when he's in top position. He has some issues when he's on bottom, as we saw in that last fight against Smolka, where he was hurting his opponent repeatedly and then just kept initiating ground exchanges and losing them. The difference is, I don't think De Los Reyes is even close to as good on the ground as Luis Smolka was. So I expect Neil Siri to at least be even, if not a little bit better on the ground than De Los Reyes, just because De Los Reyes, again, is so sloppy and aggressive. He should leave enough openings for Siri to take advantage of something on the ground, or at least find a wide enough space to get back to his feet. So overall, I think this is going to be a good fight for Neil Siri. He should be in a good position here, and I expect him to either pick up a knockout win or at least a very competent and strong decision. Now moving up to the lightweight division, we have Stevie Ray, who is 18-5, taking on Mikhail Lebeau, who is 14-4-1 with 1 no contest. Now, Nick, where did you open this fight, and how has the public shifted things so far?
Up in Ray minus 270, the comeback on LeBeau plus 190, and this line out of all of them has skyrocketed the most. Right now it's Ray minus 550. The comeback on LeBeau is currently sitting at plus 425. So I'm a fan of Ray's. I definitely appreciate his ability and his skill set, and the fact that he has been competing in, high level organizations outside of the UFC. I'm talking about Cage Warriors, of course, in England. He's obviously been the Cage Warriors, 155 lightweight champion in the past, and he deserved it because, I'll tell you what, I've said it time and time again, for smaller organizations outside of the UFC, Cage Warriors is one of the best. I mean, they have quality fighters. They match well. Everything about that organization you like. So being a champion in that organization says a lot. So he has the type of hype coming into the UFC, and he's performed amazing thus far. And the thing is with Ray, he's actually getting better. I mean, he's only 25 years old. He's had a decent amount of fights throughout his career, and you could tell and you could see the improvements fight by fight. Now he's getting confidence because he's got a couple wins under his resume in the UFC as well. So I think the guy's just going to continue to improve and continue to prove that he belongs in the UFC and he can make some noise at 155. But this fight against LeBeau is going to be interesting because I think LeBeau's tough as nails. He's going to be obviously a hard guy to finish and stop, either by sub or I think by KO. And I think he's also going to be a hard guy, even though a lot of people are going to probably say so far in LeBeau's UFC career, he has been taken down. He's been controlled on the ground as well. And Ray's going to have the advantage probably in the wrestling department. He's going to control some of the fight. And I can see that happening. But the thing is, LeBeau's kind of hard to keep on his back. He does tend to scramble back up. And if you look at the people that he's fought, I mean, as far as on the ground, Packlin in his last fight, he's known for his ground fighting. That's what the guy does best. And he wasn't able to finish, obviously, LeBeau in that fight. I mean, it was a debut. Packlin took the fight on short notice. But still, even though he was put on his back, LeBeau survived against a very talented grappler. And he made things interesting. He actually earned top position as well in that fight. And his grappling and his scrambling ability looked great. And against Moraes, if you think about it, I mean, the fight before that in his official UFC debut for LeBeau, he did get, again, put on the ground and controlled that way as well. But Moraes is a magnificent, really tremendous grappler and BJJ practitioner. I mean, we know what his resume holds there too. So not getting finished in really that dominated on the ground by Moraes is pretty impressive as well. Now in this fight against Ray, I think Ray, even though he has solid wrestling, he does not have the skill set on the ground that Moraes or even Packlin does. Honestly, a lot of people might argue that, but I don't think he's on that level as far as submission skill goes. Now, submission defense for Ray is a little bit questionable at times too. It is getting better, and again, he is improving all aspects of his game, but he has been subbed a few times. Not saying LeBeau is going to go out there and sub him, but he is, I think, savvy enough on the ground to make life interesting. And I do think LeBeau will probably surprise a few people in this fight and probably end up on top if the fight does go to the floor. But what it comes down to, honestly, is both of them are skilled. Ray is just a little bit stronger. He's going to be a little bit more effective, I think, in the stand-up game. He does hit extremely hard. He does push a high pace. He's aggressive at times as well. And I think the strength and power is going to give LeBeau some difficulties here in this fight. So I am going to pick Ray to win this fight because I think he does have a shot, even though LeBeau's tough, at possibly pulling off a KO victory against LeBeau, because I do think LeBeau, one of his weaknesses is his strike defense. If you looked his last few fights, I mean, he has been getting tagged. He's just tough, and I mean, he's not really getting affected too bad by him, but Ray does have that kind of KO power that you don't want to get tagged by Ray as much as he has been. So I could see Ray doing some damage on the feet, and then again, Ray possibly controlling the wrestling aspect of this fight as well, and just kind of grinding out 2 out of the 3 rounds at least, or maybe even all 3 rounds. I could see Ray pulling off a close competitive decision. But that's the thing. If this fight hits the scorecards, I'm expecting another close decision. So all those people that are coming in thinking Ray is a sure thing, I don't know. I think that people are going to be surprised by how well LeBeau can hang with Ray in this spot as well. So even though I'm picking Ray, I think you got to respect LeBeau a little bit more than people currently are, especially at the current price.
And I'm going to disagree on how competitive this fight is going to be. I do think that Stevie Ray is worth most of the hype. Maybe the line's a little bit too big now, but for the most part, I do think Stevie Ray rolls here. Here's why. I think these guys actually do have similar skill sets. I think they primarily do prefer to stand. They both have decent ground, but for the most part, their ground games are more defensively related, where they're pretty good at avoiding submissions and reversing bad positions if they are put in them. And really what they want to do is, just box their opponents up. Maybe LeBeau is a little bit more focused on the wrestling aspect, but I think Stevie Ray's takedown defense is good enough to avoid those type of situations. And when they are on the feet, the thing that makes Stevie Ray work really well here is the fact that he is way more explosive, way quicker, and much more powerful than LeBeau. LeBeau really doesn't have much stand-up striking finishing ability whatsoever in this fight. And while LeBeau hasn't been hurt in a fight yet in the UFC, he really hasn't faced somebody that was capable of hurting him either. And I think that Stevie Ray absolutely is that type of fighter. I mean, this guy packs a huge wallop in his strikes. He's good at offensively in terms of kicking attack, boxing attack, you name it. Plus he's a southpaw. I think LeBeau's going to have some serious issues in space against him. And if it does go to the ground, I mean, we've seen that Stevie Ray is pretty good at avoiding bad situations. Against Bandel, he was able to get out of some leg lock situations against a leg lock specialist, and then he just pummeled him on the ground until the fight was stopped. So I don't think LeBeau is going to be able to get a lot going offensively in this fight anywhere, even if he does try to get it to the ground. And I think Stevie Ray does punish him. I think Stevie Ray is one of the better lightweight prospects in the entire UFC roster. So I think that he's going to get some things going here, and I think Ray either gets a one-sided decision or potentially could stop LeBeau, although I think that's going to be a little bit more difficult. So my pick is definitely going to be Stevie Ray. Now kicking off the UFC Fight Night 76 main card, we have Nicholas Dalby, who is 14-0, taking on Darren Till, who is 13-0. Now, Nick, what's the MMA oddsmaker's perspective on this one?
I opened Dalby minus 150 to come back on Till plus 110. And right now, looking over at the line, staying relatively ballpark. It's actually Dalby right now at minus 135 to come back on Till plus 115. So line margins tightened up a little bit, and there is two-way action coming into this fight. Man, this is a battle of two Europe's best prospects at welterweight. Let's face it. I mean, both these guys, I think, deserve respect and have a tremendous future in front of them. Now, Dalby, of course, he's 30 years old, so he has to get it done here in the next couple of years. If he's going to make a serious run, I mean, he's going to have to do it now. Where Till is actually 22 years old, so he's got more room to grow as a fighter, and he will continue to grow because the guy is extremely talented as well. And he's got a little bit more time, I guess, to really put the pedal to the metal and win some serious fights. But this is a big fight for both gentlemen here because, again, they're two guys that have similar skill sets because they both have striking ability. I know that Till's probably more well known for striking, obviously, than Dalby, but Dalby can stand and bang on the feet as well. And Dalby has that overall game that regardless where the fight takes place, he's game. I mean, he's got some decent wrestling. I think he's got decent takedown defense. Obviously, his striking ability on the feet is probably a little bit underrated. He's got some knockout power to go with it. He's tough as nails. Now, defensively, again, we could say the same thing about most of these guys. I mean, they're a little bit too hittable, but it is hard to defend against the high level competition that these guys are facing in the UFC. So you're going to get hit in fights. So Dalby is really impressive, and I think he's a very solid, well put together fighter. Now, of course, in his last fight, it was extremely competitive in his UFC debut, but he did what he had to do. He pulled off a really close decision, and he showed, I think, off a lot of ability there in that fight as well. And he got that first initial UFC win under his belt, which it's good to see because I think now he will not have as many UFC jitters, so to say. And a lot of people kind of expect that, you know, with debuting fighters, and that's what you get. So I'm expecting a better performance from Dalby, and he's going to need it against a guy like Till. Till, again, I said he's extremely talented. He's going to have a little bit of height over Dalby as well, but I think he's got the advantage here as far as the knockout power and his ability to finish fights on the feet, even on the ground. I mean, with his ground and pound, if he gets top position, you do not want Till on top of you dropping bombs. I mean, the guy he's got that killer instinct, and he is a finisher. I mean, if you're looking, I believe out of his 13 wins, 11 of them are by finish. So that's the kind of fighter he is, and that's what you can expect from him. I think here, his takedown defense overall, Dalby's going to want to get this fight to the floor. And when he does, he's going to struggle at times because Till's takedown defense is improving, and it's okay. I think it's going to be able to fend off some of Dalby's takedowns, and he's going to be able to possibly even end up on top in this fight as well. But this fight, I do think, is going to end up taking place in all areas again, up against the cage. Of course, you know, in the center of the cage, these guys are going to be banging a little bit as well, and then even on the ground. So a very competitively, a great matched fight with two undefeated prospects that are kind of going against each other here. And one of them is going to take a big step forward. And I think that one person is probably going to be Till.
Yeah, this is a relatively even matchup. I mean, both guys are about the same height, same reach, you name it. But really, the thing that I like about it is the fact that Till is more of a finisher. Dalby just does not present as much of a threat on the feet, even though he is a well-rounded fighter on the feet with decent karate background and some unorthodox attacks. Till just packs way more power in his strikes. And maybe the biggest difference between these guys other than that is the fact that Dalby's a little bit more willing to take a fight to the ground. You saw that in his last fight, in his UFC debut. He was having some issues on the feet, so he ended up having to rely a lot on his offensive takedowns to get that pressure and to put his opponent on the canvas and just keep them down and, grind the fight out. He wasn't able to do much on the ground, but he was able to take the fight to the ground and sit around in top position for a while. So Till is definitely going to have to be on his guard there. He can't be over aggressive on the feet, or it's going to be really easy for Dalby to duck a strike and then put him on his back. But as we saw in Till's UFC debut as well, he was able to reverse some bad position, get on top, and when he's on top, he is much more dangerous. He was actually able to punish Oliveira and put him away with some brutal elbows on the ground. So honestly, wherever this fight goes, I do feel that Till will have that finish threat as long as he's not in a really bad defensive position. So that's honestly why I'm favoring him. And because Dalby, he showcased in that last fight that if his opponent puts a lot of pressure on him, if his opponent is throwing heavy strikes, he doesn't like it. I mean, he can't really hang around in that kind of situation. So with Till being a very good offensive threat in terms of strikes, I think you're going to see a more reserved Dalby, and you're going to see Dalby resorting to more takedowns. And as long as Till's able to avoid being put on his back for extended periods of time, I think he's going to be in good shape. Till's one of those more unique type of fighters. He's an English fighter, trains out of Brazil, speaks fluent Portuguese. If you saw his post-fight interview after his last win, kind of shocked the Brazilian crowd. And I think that Till is an excellent young fighter with a lot of promise. So I expect this fight to be competitive. And really the only thing keeping it competitive is the threat of those takedowns from Dalby, because I really don't see him doing a lot on the feet that's going to scare Till. I think Till can walk right through a lot of his strikes and start landing some of his own. And Till has some nasty kicks. So he might have to be a little bit more reserved on when he uses them and not be predictable, which would allow Dalby to get those takedowns. But I think that those could be a big factor in this fight as well. And I was actually really surprised that Dalby gassed a little bit in that UFC debut because he has some 5-round fight experience. But I think Till definitely is the side, mainly because of that finishing threat, and I'm going to pick him. Now dropping down to the lightweight division, we have Norman Park, who is 21-4-1, taking on Heza Madadi, who is 13-3. Now, Nick, where did you open this fight, and how has the public shifted things so far?
I opened Park minus 210, the comeback on Madadi plus 160, and right now it's Park minus 280, the comeback on Madadi is plus 240. Not surprised by the movement. I mean, it hasn't gone crazy, but more action coming in on Park is to be expected, especially in this spot here. I mean, Madadi's been out. I mean, he's been in jail. He's a talented fighter, but his personal life and his personal issues, I mean, being 35 years old with a time off, it couldn't have helped him here. I mean, automatically that's one huge red flag that goes to the advantage of Park here as well. So Madadi, to get this fight, really, he's going to have to probably outstrike Park on the feet, because he's going to have difficulties, I think, taking Park to the ground here in this spot. Because obviously Park, I mean, he's showed us what he's capable of. He has really good takedown defense, and even his offensive wrestling is actually okay at times. But what he's going to have to use here, obviously Park he's going to have the advantage on the feet, because I think he's going to be the younger, fresher fighter. I mean, this problem with me with Park, I know I'm kind of going a little bit all over the place here with this fight, but he's had a couple lackluster performances. Now, again, I mean, they've been to decent competition with Ronaldo and Tibau, but it just seems like something's a little bit off with Park. It just didn't seem like, even though they're good competitors he's facing, it just seemed like he wasn't the same. I mean, he was picking up a lot of momentum, and then all of a sudden he had a couple of those performances that you don't like to see in fighters that are improving and kind of making a climb, towards the top of the division. So Park had a setback for sure, losing those couple fights and the way he performed in those fights. So that is a head scratcher for me, but overall Park should have the striking advantage over Madadi here, and he should be able to keep the fight upright. So, I mean, that should lead him to victory, and I'm expecting him to probably win on the scorecards. But Madadi, again, he's 35 years old. He's had some time off. His chin is questionable. He's been wobbled at times as well, so he doesn't have the strongest chin, even though he's never been officially knocked out. And I think Park could probably test that here as well. Now, that being said, Madadi's striking is not that bad. I mean, it's definitely serviceable. He just doesn't have a tremendous amount of knockout power. And again, he's the type of fighter that needs to get the fight to the floor. And his submission game, once it's on the floor, is definitely legit. I mean, the guy is capable of finishing the fight by submission, and he's capable of finishing Park on the ground as well. Madadi, I mean, let's not forget, he has a very impressive win. He was losing the fight against Michael Johnson a while back, but I'm just kind of highlighting that because it tells you what kind of fighter he is. And then he ended up obviously coming back and getting the W. And in fact, that was his last fight, and that was all the way back in 2013. So he came back and won that fight by choke. So he has that capability of finishing decent fighters. And Park, even though he's gotten better on the ground and even his sub defense has improved, you never know. I mean, Madadi's that type of sneaky sub fighter that if he gets his opportunity, he could finish it. So that's the biggest threat to Park, I think, in this fight is Madadi maybe taking his back and submitting him on the ground. Outside of that, it should be Park's fight to win or lose. I mean, it's in Ireland. That should obviously have a little bit more I think impact as far as confidence level goes, and the hometown crowd being behind Park, and something as far as motivation goes for Park as well. So everything across the board kind of, to me, points towards Park winning this fight. But skill set for skill set, it's interesting because both these guys definitely are talented. I just don't have much faith in the layoff and the way he matches up with Park here for Madadi. So I think Park does win this fight.
Norman Park should be in a really good spot here, mainly because of Heza Madadi's long layoff because of the prison sentence that had him out of the UFC for a couple years. But man, Norman Park hasn't looked great in his last couple fights. He's kind of been a little tentative, and he was facing guys that kind of have a similar style to Madadi, although they aren't as physical as Madadi. But he was facing guys in Francisco Trinaldo and Gleison Tebow that, are big, strong grapplers that are usually looking to get the fight to the ground for the most part. And Madadi is absolutely going to be doing that. He is going to be tenacious with his takedown attempts. I mean, he's called the Mad Dog for a reason. I mean, he's very aggressive. Now, Park could take advantage of that on the feet because Park definitely is the better striker here. So when they're in open space, when he's got an opportunity to land strikes, he absolutely needs to do that. Madadi got blistered by Michael Johnson in his last fight, but then ran out of steam a little bit. Johnson did, and then Madadi was able to just keep going after him and ended up picking up a submission. It was a huge upset. But against Park, I think Park is going to be a little bit more reserved. He's not going to run out of steam. He's not going to gas or anything. It's just all about whether or not Madadi can get this fight to the ground and keep it there, because that is 100% of the way that he wins this fight. Madadi is very aggressive. He's even aggressive on the feet, even though he doesn't hit very hard. So I think that's a situation where Park could really take advantage of that with some good counter striking. It just depends on if he shows up. And Madadi doesn't have a great chin. And especially, now that he's 2.5, 3 years older after the prison stay, I think Park could absolutely take advantage of that. So there's a big difference here in terms of age, mainly, with Norman Park being 28 to Madadi's 37, and then chin strength. So I do feel that Park is that younger, fresher fighter. And even though he hasn't performed admirably, at least he's been performing. So I do think Madadi's a good fighter, training out of that All-Stars gym in Sweden. But I think this is a bad matchup for him, a rough fight for him to return from. So I think Norman Park picks this up. And even though he's from Northern Ireland and not regular Ireland, Park should still have a lot of that crowd support. So I'm going to side with Norman Park here. Now dropping down to the flyweight division, we have Paddy Holohan, who is 12-1-1, taking on Louis Smolka, who is 9-1. Now, Nick, what's the MMA odds maker's perspective on this one?
I opened Smolka minus 130, the comeback on Holohan minus 110, and right now it's Smolka minus 120, even money. Two-way action coming in, line margins tighten up a little bit as well. This is a tough fight because, both these guys like to take the fight to the ground. They have a complete skill set. Both of them match up really well because their best attribute is, of course, on the ground. They have length for the division as well. So this is like, looking in the mirror and facing somebody that's freakishly similar to you in a lot of ways. But what differentiates them a little bit, I think, Smolka has, even though, I mean, he tends to slow down in fights, of course, but I think Smolka has some edges in this fight against Holohan because Holohan's cardio at times has been suspect for sure. I mean, his striking ability, a lot of people are going to think or possibly even overrate him a tad because of his knockout win against Sampo for Holohan in his debut, official UFC debut. But outside of that, I mean, his striking is not that good, to be honest with you. And his strike defense, especially when he's tired, is pretty bad. So he's hittable. The guy is, even though his chin's held up and he's never officially been knocked out, I mean, you could obviously tag the guy, you could get the guy in all sorts of trouble. Now, is Smolka the kind of guy that could do that? It's tough because Smolka, you could say a lot of the same things about him too. I mean, I want to say that his striking is pretty good, but at times, I mean, Smolka, the way he goes about his striking, I mean, from fight to fight, it looks a little bit different. I mean, he just leaves a little bit of openings himself. He does get clipped defensively. He does have length and he could use his striking effectively at times. And I think he will probably have the striking edge here against Holohan, honestly. And he's got a little bit more power to go along with it too. So he's a little bit more dangerous, I think, on the striking aspect. But defensively, again, I mean, I just don't like how he moves his head, how he moves, period, when getting hit. I mean, he kind of leaves himself open to possibly getting floored. But I don't think that's going to be a problem either because Holohan, again, doesn't have that kind of knockout power either. So unless these guys run into a knee, which is, I guess, possible here because they both like to shoot for takedowns and get the fight to the floor, I don't see this fight ending by knockout. I think they're going to kind of neutralize each other along the way. And I think that it's going to be Smolka that probably outmaneuvers and out techniques Holohan on the ground, I think, is what's going to happen here. Because I do think they'll be back and forth, and it is virtually a pick 'em fight for a reason because they match up so well. Both these guys are hard to submit, even though they have good submission offense. But I think you have to point towards Smolka. I think he is a little bit better in the striking aspect of the game. I think the wrestling, if it goes back and forth, I think Smolka's going to end up probably on top more times than not. His scrambling ability is pretty good. And again, combine that with Holohan fading and gassing quite a bit. Even though this fight's in Ireland and he's going to have that home crowd behind him, I still think it's more of a winnable fight for Smolka. So I trust him more at this point, even though a lot of people are more on the Holohan kind of hype train. So I think it is going to be a competitive fight. It's kind of a tricky one, but I think Smolka should get the win more times than not. And again, I think if there is going to be a finish by knockout in this fight, it's probably going to be Smolka knocking out Holohan. And if it does hit the scorecards, I think we're going to see Smolka outpoint Holohan as well, probably winning 2 out of 3 rounds, even if it is in Ireland. So I do think Smolka's a better fighter, and he's going to take a big step forward here at 125. And Holohan, he might be a little bit, he finally might get exposed even more so in this fight and not have the performance that I think a lot of people are expecting. So Smolka's the official pick for me.
Paddy Holohan's biggest strength against most fighters is the fact that he's extremely long, extremely tall in the division, and he can utilize that both on the feet and on the ground. But against Luis Smolka, he's only got 1 inch in height, and he's only got 1 inch in reach. Even leg reach, where he's extremely lengthy there, he's only got another inch or 2. So I expect Luis Smolka to hold his own on the feet here, although Smolka did get rocked in his last fight against Neil Seery, but I don't think Holohan is as good of a striker overall as Neil Seery. And when that fight did go to the ground, Seery had huge issues because Smolka is an extremely competent ground fighter, both in terms of reversing positions, in terms of gaining top position, and in terms of keeping those top positions and keeping his opponent down. Now, Holohan, as opposed to Seery, he actually is a bit of a submission threat. He's dangerous on the ground. He's crafty. He's aggressive. He's always looking for something. So Smolka's going to have to be a little bit careful, but I do see this fight hitting the canvas often, and I think Smolka is going to be able to ride that top position and basically force Holohan to fight off of his back for extended periods of time. And when he's forced to do that, that's when he has a lot of issues. I mean, if you look at that, his 1 UFC loss, his 1 career loss, in overall in his professional career to Chris Kalikas, he ended up forced to do a lot of groundwork for extended periods of time, and that exhausted him, especially because he ended up on his back a lot. And I think that he is going to end up on his back a lot against Smolka, and I think Smolka can wear him down. And with how hyped up this Irish crowd is going to be for Paddy Holohan, I think that he's going to have a massive adrenaline dump. So unless Holohan puts Smolka away quickly, and I don't think he will, then I think that he is going to get exhausted in rounds 2 and 3. Now, his conditioning has improved in his most recent fights, but they haven't exactly been the same type of fights where he was put in those bad positions. And I think against a guy like Smolka, I think Smolka is competent enough that he can put him in those positions. He can force Holohan to work a lot harder than he wants to. And I think that he's going to get in some trouble. So I really do like Luis Smolka here. I think that he is a solid overall fighter. And I don't think that Holohan is a big enough threat on the feet to take advantage of any of Smolka's kind of weaknesses, because Smolka is a bit slower paced. He's not quite as quick or explosive as most flyweights, but I don't think that's going to be as much of a factor here, because I do think this fight is going to spend a lot of time on the canvas. So I'm going to favor Luis Smolka. Now this brings us to the main event of the evening. We have Dustin Poirier, who is 18-4, taking on Joe Duffy, who is 13-1. Now, Nick, where did you open this fight, and how has the public shifted things so far?
Up in Duffy, minus 185, the comeback on Poirier, plus 145. And action has come in on Duffy. He's now minus 240. The comeback on Poirier is plus 200. Always a tough line. I mean, Poirier gets that type of respect that he deserves, actually, from UFC bettors in most cases. I mean, the guy's a very talented fighter. Now he's fighting at lightweight, and it seems to be a better fit for him thus far. I mean, this is going to definitely be a big test, and if he's going to stay at lightweight or not. I think if he does lose this fight, we could see him drop down possibly to 145. We'll see how it goes. But overall, again, talk about similarities. I mean, we've said it throughout this fight card. I mean, the way the UFC's matched some of these fights up, you have guys fighting similar skill sets, and that's the same thing you got here with Poirier and Duffy. I mean, both these guys are really good on the feet as far as striking goes. Of course, Duffy has the boxing background, and he does have relatively good boxing with power to go along with it. And of course, Poirier's always had good stand-up. We all know that as well, throughout his UFC career, and is capable of finishing fights, standing up as well. So this is a great fight, because I think we will see a war back and forth, on the feet. I mean, these guys are definitely going to slug it out. I think on the ground, that's the trick here. The tricky thing is because both these guys have tremendous ground games as well. Duffy, he's more than capable. I mean, look at that sub that he just recently came off of. I mean, that was a tremendous win over George, which I believe at that time George has never been submitted before that. So it was his first official submission loss, and that's impressive. When you fight a savvy veteran that's been around for a long time and has never been submitted, then you end up submitting him, especially by triangle choke. It's impressive. So Duffy's capable of finishing the fight on the feet or on the ground. But the concern with Duffy for me is, if you look back, I mean, he has been submitted, so his defensive flaws at times stand out. And if you look back, even before his submission loss on more of the regional scene in Europe, he had competed in the Ultimate Fighter, I believe it was Ultimate Fighter 12, season 12, and he lost to Kyle Watson, and he got rear naked choked in that fight. It's submitted. So, in my opinion, when that season started, I thought Duffy was the guy to beat, because a lot of people might not have been familiar with him, but with his skill set and the wars that he fought throughout his career, and the ability that he had to win those fights against decent competition, again, in Cage Warriors, which I mentioned earlier, was impressive to me. So I thought, man, this guy's going to really set himself up nice here. He wins the Ultimate Fighter. A lot of people are going to know about him, and a lot of people are going to respect him, and he's going to get the hype and the recognition he deserves. But he lost right away. I mean, so that was a bit of a surprise there for sure, how he went about it. So defensively, I am concerned about Duffy. And then if you look even in his fight against George, in his last fight, I mean, he does at times, even on the feet, even though offensively he's okay, he gets tagged a little bit more than you like. He showed toughness. I mean, he hasn't really been wobbled too much or whatever, but he is getting marked up and he's getting tagged. And Poirier has a tremendous amount of power. I mean, you cannot compare Ivan George to the power that Poirier has here, because if Poirier starts landing like that, I think Duffy could be in some serious trouble here. So again, it's another one of those situations where I think offensively Duffy is an absolute stud, capable of finishing most lightweights for sure, but defensively there's some question marks that I need to see answered. And this fight might answer him, because Poirier offensively, again, in his own right, is more than capable of finishing fighters, and he's proven that time and time again. So big test for both guys. I think it's going to be a big test for Poirier here to prove that his chin is okay, because Duffy does hit hard and he's capable, as I mentioned, of finishing on the feet. And one of the biggest issues for me with Poirier throughout his career is that he's been tagged, he's been wobbled, he's been rocked, he's been knocked out before in fights as well. So you don't want to see that. Maybe I'm being a little bit too hard on his chin, but that is a flag for me that stands out with Poirier, is he is hittable again, and he does have trouble against good strikers. So this is going to be interesting. I think Poirier's best path to victory is actually taking the fight to the ground and trying to get Duffy's back and winning by submission here as well. If he does that, then the fight could be over relatively quick. If he struggles with that, I think we're going to see a heck of a fight throughout, and we might see it hit the scorecards. I don't know. It's kind of tough to say if it does or not, because I think both these guys will find a way to finish it. So I don't think it realistically will hit the scorecards, but if these guys can neutralize each other out, we should see a fun fight while it lasts. I'm going to lean towards Duffy a little bit more. I'm going back and forth on this fight, honestly. I'm going to lean towards him because I think that I'm not too sold on Poirier at lightweight yet, even though he's looked great. And this is going to be a big test. So I'm slightly leaning more towards Duffy, but make no mistake, this is a dog or pass situation. I mean, a plus 200 where the line is now over 5 dimes. I think there could be some value of Poirier, and I think people were maybe under his skill set and his ability to finish fights too, and probably overrating Duffy's defensive skills a little bit. So it's dog or pass, but at the same time, I do lean a little bit more towards Duffy. Again, it's in Ireland. He is finally getting some of that hype and, recognition and, promotion that I thought he was going to get a while back. So he's starting to get there. He's starting to make some waves. I think things are pointing a little bit more towards in his direction for this fight, but at the same time, it's dog or pass. So my official pick is Duffy to win.
Yeah, this fight is definitely close. Duffy and Poirier have both looked amazing in their first 2 fights in the lightweight division in the UFC, but obviously Poirier comes from a lot more experience in terms of his huge run that he had in the featherweight division. Now, I think that the move up to the lightweight division for Poirier has been incredible for him. He's been able to take a little bit more punishment. His chin definitely wasn't the greatest at featherweight, but I think he was sucking so much water out of his system that it was having a detrimental effect on his chin and everything. So moving up, he's been stronger. He's not had to have as brutal of a weight cut, and it's paid off. I mean, his 2 wins, they have been against decent UFC lightweights in terms of Carlos Diego Ferreira and Yancy Medeiros, and he steamrolled them, absolutely obliterated them. Now, Duffy, on the other hand, he's looked good in his 2 fights, but they were against significantly worse competition. So he was given the slow build a little bit in his first 2 UFC fights, and then now they're just throwing him right in there against a guy that's currently ranked in the top 15. And I don't know if Joseph Duffy's ready for this yet. I think, the guy beat Conor McGregor back in the day, but that was when McGregor was just getting his start. He was just this mouthy Irish kid that didn't have a lot of great takedown defense or submission defense yet, and Duffy was able to take advantage of that. Now, Duffy is a competent offensive grappler, so that is something that Poirier will have to be on the lookout for because, he has been submitted before. Granted, it was in the 4th round against Chan Sung Jung in a main event in a fight that, he had taken a lot of punishment in, and I think he had just been rocked. So I don't expect Poirier to get submitted by Joseph Duffy in this fight, but maybe it could happen if Duffy hurts him. That is the biggest difference between these guys, honestly, is the fact that Poirier has had that history of, poor chin issues. He's been rocked in fights. He's been finished in fights by strikes. And Duffy, he hasn't. I mean, while his striking defense isn't the best, Duffy is a bit of an offensive juggernaut. So Poirier will have to be on his guard. He's going to have those hands up, chin tucked and everything, because if Duffy hits him with something really hard, Poirier could get himself in trouble. And this is a 5-round fight, so there's going to be a lot of time for Duffy to land that big strike. On the other hand, Poirier's striking has improved leaps and bounds. It's really gone to that next level since the move to lightweight, but he was showcasing signs of seriously improved power in his last few fights in the featherweight division as well. I mean, that complete one-sided destruction of Eric Koch was, breathtaking. So I do think that Poirier is a huge threat on the feet in this fight as well, especially just because of, how capable he is with his hands. I mean, he has really come a long way. And I think even though Joseph Duffy hasn't been knocked out before, if Poirier connects with something really solid, he could send him for a loop. Now, obviously, Duffy's going to have a tremendous amount of support from the Irish fans, and that's going to fuel him a little bit. But Poirier's been in there in hostile situations before. I don't think that's going to be too much of an issue. My only concern with Poirier, other than the fact that if he gets clipped by something, is the fact that he can get a little overly emotional about some of these things. Now, Conor McGregor kind of forced his hand a little bit just because of all the talk and trash and everything that he was saying that got Poirier out of sorts. So that's not quite this same situation because Duffy's a lot more reserved, but it could still happen. Now, in terms of pure skill sets, I actually do think that Dustin Poirier is a little bit better overall than Joseph Duffy at this point in their careers. Duffy just hasn't faced that top level of competition. He hasn't been in these type of situations. And I think this could be a situation where Dustin Poirier, kind of defeats the hype a little bit. Everybody keeps talking about, Duffy gets to face Conor McGregor again down the line because McGregor needs to avenge that loss. Dustin Poirier is getting overlooked a little bit. He's getting disrespected by the betting public. And I think that this is a situation where he could surprise a lot of people. So I actually think that Dustin Poirier could finish this fight. I think he could win a decision. I think he could knock Duffy out, or he could even submit him. So this is a good situation for Dustin Poirier. As long as he does not get clipped, then I expect Dustin Poirier to actually pick up this upset. So I'm going to pick him. So that'll do it for our full event breakdown for UFC Fight Night 76. Part 2 of the Premium Oddscast featuring our premium bets will be out this Friday afternoon following the weigh-ins. So stay tuned for that if you're an MMAOddsBreaker premium member. If you'd like to become a premium member, just go to MMAOddsBreaker.com and you can sign up in the top right corner of our homepage for either Nick's or Mike James's premium bets. If we have a free play to give out, make sure to follow at MMAOB Premium on Twitter because that's where we'll post them first. We can also notify you of our free bets via email alert if you prefer that method. Just send an email to picks@MMAOddsBreaker.com and we'll add you to our free bet mailing list. Special thanks to our sponsors, 5 Dimes Sportsbook and Countermove. Good luck, everyone, and hopefully the betting gods are on your side this weekend.